Right, we're on. Okay, we're up to chapter 29, Spy HQ of The Fun Factor by Mat Waugh. You alright, comfy?
Yeah.
Comfy? What's with the grin for? Anyway, with the sound of blood pumping in my ears, I shakingly pulled out the notes, one for each photo. The Vati family notes was a piece of A4 ripped from a pad, scrawled with biro. Thora, 12, sensitive, lost mother at 7, medium digital addiction, low activity, poor diet. Reggie, 8, bright, sometimes needy, high digital addiction.
What's needy?
Needs attention.
Oh.
Maybe needs help with schooling. High digital addiction, medium activity, poor diet. Shannon, 17, half-sister to Thora and Reggie, emotionally unstable, ultra digital addiction, low activity, poor diet. In a red pen, in the margin, someone had added some extra notes. Watch family closely. Lives next door to FF Nerve Centre. Agent 462 has assigned herself to monitor. I breathed deeply and looked sideways at Izzy. She hadn't noticed. As I calmed down, I started to feel quite annoyed. I wasn't sensitive for a start, so that was rubbish. I didn't lose my mother. It was nothing to do with me. She died. I didn't have any addictions, digital or otherwise. I walked to school, and if I did have a poor diet, well, that certainly wasn't my fault. Apart from that, it was perfect. They got Shannon right, mind you. She definitely had emotional issues, or at least she used to. Now she had bad acting issues. Another mistake, she was 18. I flicked on through the folders. The next one was entitled Play Park, then Bikes, Internet, Home Life, and so on. The last folder to contain notes was Diet. Each folder had grainy coloured images of children eating, reading, playing on the zip wire, even sitting in assembly. I realised that Izzy and Reggie were looking over my shoulder. "That's me," whispered Izzy, "in my bedroom. And there's me, throwing the paper aeroplanes." We looked at each other. "You see it now, don't you? We're mice. Mice in an experiment," I said, with Agent 462 looking over our shoulders to make sure we don't step out of line. "And Dad?" asked Reggie. "He's not on the sheet, so he can't be involved, can he?" "He's up to his neck, Reggie," I said. "I've heard him. He knows everything." "But why? Why would he allow it?" Nobody could answer that. Izzy reached over and flicked through the remaining empty folders. The next one was entitled Mid-Series Assembly Special, live transmission at 10:30, Prime Minister. And underneath, Friday's date. I wasn't any wiser. Why would that horrible man be interested in us? Didn't he have a country to run? Izzy flicked on. The series of folders continued up to week 16. Show final. Week 16. They've hardly started. "I don't understand any of it," Reggie said. "What am I addicted to? Why are they talking about? What are they talking about?" "Tech," I said. "Tech and modern living." "Don't you see? They're making changes, turning it all off, switching us to manual. They want to send us back to the Stone Age, and everyone's watching them do it." "But what about our fun?" Reggie asked, stabbing his finger at the Fun Factory logo through the glass. "When are they going to give us some of that?" Before anyone could try and answer, Charlie shouted from somewhere outside the room. I'd almost forgotten about him. "Hey, that's my kitchen. This is amazing. You've got to see this." Reggie ran through to find him. "Put the folder back where you found it," said Izzy. I turned it over. On the back, someone had written password 1234 in faint pencil, perhaps to remind them of the worst password in the world. I slid the folder back into position. Izzy and I walked through to the panopticon, and the sight that greeted us took our breath away. 3 walls of this large, windowless room were lined with screens, each one the size of a medium TV. A comfy black chair with a touchscreen mounted in front was positioned on a rotating circular platform in the centre of the room. Reggie and Charlie were squashed in together, with Reggie tapping away icons on the screen like a budget in a mirror. On one wall, all the screens were blank except one. On that we could see Mr. Morton, our fearsomely unfriendly caretaker, pushing a mop listlessly up and down a school corridor. All of the other screens displayed a blinking message, no motion detected. A dozen of the screens on a second wall were active. We could see 2 children talking on a bench in the play park under the floodlights, 2 waiting outside the shop, and various grown-ups walking home, hunched against the cold. On the final wall, all of the screens were labelled in the corner. Excuse me. Family 1 in the top left, through to Family 26 at bottom right. And on each screen we could peer into a room in that house. Only a couple of screens were blank, privacy mode enabled. This wasn't like CCTV. Each picture was crystal clear, in full colour. Most active screens were showing bedrooms with 1 or more children lying on their beds reading. One was building a train track, another was fighting with his brother. You could see him shouting, though you couldn't hear him. "That's Callum," said Charlie, pointing. "Go on, Callum, throw him off the bed." "Hang on," said Reggie, tapping away at the icons. "I see how this thing works. It's the same as TV Stimulator 4, but without the cheat mode. So if we press this one, let's hear what he's saying." The sound of Callum's voice rang out, and as if he was fighting in the very same room. "I'm going to get you, Jensen." Jensen, squashed underneath Callum, shouted something back that we couldn't hear. "Yeah, well, you deserved it. You told Mrs. Scott about my sweets." A voice called the boys for a drink of milk. They untangled themselves and left the room, and the camera turned itself off. No motion detected. "Can they hear us?" whispered Izzy. "Nah, it'll be one way, unless you turn this on," said Reggie, tapping a finger microphone. Charlie chuckled. "Looks like Callum is in trouble with Mrs. Scott again." "Hey look, there's our kitchen." I pointed up to Family 9, where Dad was busy stirring something revolting on the hob. Melissa was working on a laptop, while Shannon sat opposite, gazing into space and smiling. Then, as we were watching, Shannon looked directly up at the camera and winked. My blood ran cold. "What? She's seen us!" Izzy cried. "We should get out of here soon," I said. "This is so wrong." "No, she can't possibly see us," said Reggie. "But I still think we should leave," I said, glancing at a red digital clock above the door, which flashed 18:15. "The next show starts in an hour. I reckon they'll be up here for that." "They? Who's they?" said Charlie. "Melissa, definitely," I said. "Maybe Wharton," said Izzy. "Maybe. Definitely Shannon," said Reggie. Why would she be here?" I asked. "She's in the notes. She's part of their experiment." "What experiment?" asked Charlie. "I'll explain later," said Reggie to Charlie, who nodded. Patience is one of Charlie's many fine qualities. "Shannon's definitely in on it," said Reggie. "There are notes all over the studio for her. Sit here, Shannon. Stand here, Shannon. Don't look here, Shannon. That kind of thing." "Shannon? A TV presenter?" I thought of her silky hair and new beaming smile. It was possible. Reggie prized himself out of the chair. "So how are we going to blow the place up?" said Charlie. "What are you talking about?" said Izzy. "That's what James Bond always does when he leaves the villain's secret underground hideaway. Blows it sky high. Kaboom!" "Yeah, well, I'd rather you didn't do that, Charlie," I said. "For starters, this secret hideaway isn't very secret, and secondly, it's attached to our house." "We'll have to be smarter than that," said Reggie. "They'll be on to us as soon as they know we've been here. We need to attack when they're not concentrating." "What, like a distraction?" said Izzy. A deadly virus," pondered Charlie. "A poisonous rain cloud. A visit from Mr. Big. An insect I don't know, maybe some local gangster. An insect invasion?" We let Charlie's thoughts hang in the air. Nobody wanted to tell him his suggestions were rubbish. Whatever we're planning to do, while they're not looking, it has to be done this week, I said, before the live show. Who knows what will happen after that? Let's all be quiet for a minute, have a proper think. Then each of us can say our idea, and we'll vote on the one we think is the best. Everyone nodded. Okay, go, I said. I watched the digital clock. Have you ever noticed that the dots in the middle flash with the seconds? And if you count them, you can work out exactly when a minute is up. Let's hear everyone's ideas then. Ideas for what? Asked Charlie. I sighed. Ideas for ending this madness, I said. Excuse me. For getting our normal lives back. Right, Izzy, you go first. Or you first. What, me? Why me first? Why not you? Because I'm the oldest and I'm in charge. Okay, Reggie, you go. Well, said Reggie, it's not going to be easy. I'll go first, interrupted Charlie. I've got an amazing plan. I said. Let's hear it then. So we know that all the grown-ups are spies, right? And they're probably from North Korea or somewhere. But they're bound to need spy messages from HQ. They always do. So we get in one room and tie them up and then... Okay, Charlie, not sure that's going to happen, I said. But I haven't told you the best bit. Because when they confess, we knit their clothes and pretend to be them so they can find out what the instructions are. Simple. And then we blow the place sky high, I guessed. Yes, said Charlie Beam, you know my plan. Got it, I said. Sometimes it's easy to go along with Charlie. Just supposing that doesn't work out. Does anyone have any other ideas? Izzy scuffed the ground with a foot. Charlie picked his nose. Reggie looked up at the ceiling as if there might be a plan floating if he stared hard enough. Well, I said, it looks like we risked our lives for nothing. They're going to do their mid-series special with the Prime Minister, whatever that is, and we've got months and months more of this misery. And then who knows what comes next? And all we can do is know that they're watching us and wish we could think of a good way to stop them. Charlie opened his mouth. Apart from Charlie's plan, of course, and that won't work. Well, this is rubbish. That's what it is. The feeling of disappointment was crushing. I thought we were a team, a gang who could make things happen. Turns out we were four losers without a clue. We'll come up with something, said Reggie. We've got until Friday, I guess. It's only Tuesday. But we haven't even got the beginnings of a plan. It'll be fine, said Izzy. We just need to do our homework. Homework? And Neil exploded. What use is the bus stop method of division when grown-ups are making your life a misery? Shh, Dora, relax, said Izzy. Come on, I need to get home. And that, it seemed, was the end of the meeting. We glumly retraced our steps out of the panopticon and down the stairs, being careful to put everything back exactly as we found it. I'd switched off the lights, plunging the upstairs into darkness. Charlie peeled the jelly hand off the sensor and I was careful to take it from him in case he was tempted to give it a nibble. Izzy gave the glass panel a rub with her sleeve. And with a quick vow of secrecy and a promise to meet again the following day, we traipsed home. Chapter 30, My Plan. Meeting again after school wasn't that easy. Wherever you stood in the village, you'd look up and see a camera. In the end, we grabbed bikes and headed down to the dairy car park. After docking our bikes, they might have microphones in them, warned Reggie, we found a quiet corner behind the old building. But I don't know why we bothered. Nobody had anything new to say except Charlie, and nobody was in the mood to hear his high explosive plans. We crouched in silence and despair, staring out at the rapidly filling car park. That's odd, I said. Look, why are they going that way? A thin stream of people was splitting off from the main crowd and disappearing around the back of the dairy, many of them looking around furtively as they did so. Who knows? Shortcut, said Reggie. I shook my head. I'm off home, said Reggie. I think I'll hang here a bit, I said. Reggie shrugged. Come on, let's go. There are hardly any bikes left. And they left me. And that was just fine. even when all the bikes were half gone, and an hour later, forcing me to join the grown-ups for the long trudge home. Reggie was still grumpy when I got home, but that was okay too. I had too much to think about. Lying under my scratchy blanket, staring towards a sensor in the dark, I waved to set it off, the red light pinging on, and I imagined unseen, unknown figures watching me from the Pantopticon next door, disappointed when nothing happened. In Wednesday's assembly, to the surprise of everyone except our little gang, Frosty announced that lunch would be a bit later on Friday because we would be having a special mid-morning assembly to announce the winner of the Tidy Classroom Cup. It's worth explaining that every week Mr. Morton, the grumpy caretaker that everyone called the jailer because of his jangling bunch of keys, would shuffle to the front and hand over a tiny classroom certificate to that week's winner. Class 8S won because Mrs. Scott was always nagging us about it. You'd think Mr. Morton would be happy about this weekly ritual since we were making his life easier, but every week he scowled at the winner as if he was being asked to hand over his salary, not a piece of card with a tiny terrapin cartoon on it.
What's a terrapin?
A terrapin? Yeah, it's just like a small turtle. I think he just hated being told to come out of his stinky cupboard where he sat with his mops and his brooms, drinking tea and reading the paper. But Frosty wasn't talking about a certificate here. This was the first day any of us has heard about a tiny classroom cup. Tidy classroom cup. You know, just saying tiny to you, and it was stuck in my head. But that was fine. In fact, it was better than fine. It might be the answer I was looking for, although for now I turned Izzy and Reggie's questions away. I was still turning ideas over in my head, and that's where they were going to stay, hidden a little while longer. Thora, it was Reggie, whispering from his bed that night. Talk to me. Sorry, Reggie, I'm thinking. But I've nearly finished, maybe. Do you have a plan? Maybe. I don't know. Ask me in the morning. And with that I turned over and fell straight to sleep. My fingers were aching, my bum was numb, and I was cold. It turns out that houses get quite chilly at night, and you'll particularly feel it if you sit on the floor in your nightie for 2 hours, writing on index cards. But there we were, 4 piles, each with a name on top, held together with a rubber band. Thora, I almost jumped out of my skin at the sound of Reggie's voice. Have you... I turned to him from my spot in the corner, tucked behind the wardrobe and out of sight of the camera, and held my fingers to my lips. I bundled the pile of cards up in my school uniform and went to the bathroom to get dressed. At break time, I pulled the gang into a huddle behind the bins. Where have you been, Thora? Asked Charlie. Have you got a plan? The others looked at me nervously. I could feel that familiar burning heat of a spotlight, the crushing weight of their expectation, the sensation of being wound up too tightly. But somehow, this time, it felt a little bit different. It took me a moment to recognise the feeling because it was so similar. It was excitement. Yes, but now it's your turn, I said with a confidence I didn't completely feel. I handed each of them a stack of cards with their names written neatly on the top. This is the POA. Hide it now. Read it in your bathroom later. What's a POA? Asked Lizzie. And why do we have to read it in the bathroom? Plan of action, I said. 2 could play at this spy talk. And the bathroom is the only place in your house without cameras. It's how we're going to blow this thing apart. Cool, said Charlie. But why do we want to blow up a bathroom? Not literally, I said. Izzy looked relieved. No, it's better than that. Tomorrow everything changes, but you need to know your part, then rip the plan into pieces and flush it down the toilet. Charlie was peering at his cards. I've only got one thing to do, he said. Yes, but nobody else can do it, I said. You can rely on me, Thora. I'm going to go home, learn it, and then use the card to wipe my bottom. Nobody will be able to read it then. Izzy made a noise like she was being sick. Remember, everyone, this will only work if you do exactly what it says on the cards. Do you trust me? I held out my hand. I trust you, Thora, Reggie said solemnly, placing his hand on mine. Me too, said Izzy. Me three, said Charlie, joining the stack of hands. You're the man with the plan. The school bell rang for the end of break. I made sure that we had all tucked our cards out of sight, and we headed for the door. On the way back, I sneaked into the toilets to rehearse. I'd written out my part like I was one of the others, to keep everything separate in my head. That way, when I was following instructions, I forget that they were written by me. On my first card was instruction number 1. Tidy the classroom, but make sure Mrs. Scott sees you doing it. So, at afternoon break, I hung behind and set to work. I tidied up the coloured pencils and sharpened the blunt ones. I threw away the drawing scraps and stacked the topic books. I lined up the chairs and tables in neat rows. I pinned back the flapping poster of Iron Age Britain, the one that Mrs. Scott had put up, and she took down the e-safety pictures. Then, as I was running out of things to do, I saw Mrs. Scott returning with her cup of tea. As she entered, I started walking towards the door to the playground. Well, well, she said. Thora, was this your hard work? I stopped and turned. Yes, Mrs. Scott. I thought it was a bit messy, with the special tidy classroom cup tomorrow. How commendable, she exclaimed. A tidy classroom means a tidy mind, I said, completed her catchphrase. That's right. Now get yourself a bit of fresh air. You've earned it. Thanks, Mrs. Scott, I said, running outside. I stopped dead in my tracks. My heart was pounding and I felt dizzy, but in a good way. That was it. We've started. There was no going back. Shall I stop there?
No.
One more?
No,
One more
you
for
said to
today.
read the whole book.
No, I'll do one more for today.
1, 2, 3.
One more.
No,
My voice will just go whisper. Just one more, okay? And then we'll do the last 3 tomorrow. Yes, and then we can get straight on to reading Walter Scott.
No.
Or we could go straight to Walter Scott today.
No. I thought your voice was going cold.
Exactly, it is, right. Chapter 31. And the winner is Friday, the big day. I'd been up late the previous night, reading my cards, going over the ifs and the buts in my mind. Reggie had gone straight to sleep, which worried me. He had a lot to get right. But I hadn't got time to worry about that now, and turned off my alarm clock at the first chime, shook Reggie awake, and we slid quietly out of the house. Without a word, Reggie disappeared up the path into Enid's house, holding his roll of packaging tape and a large jelly hand. The village was deserted. Not even the dog walkers were up yet. I thought about taking a bike, but decided it was too risky. So I set out on the longest run of my life, right out of the village and down to the dairy. Panting heavily, I arrived at the handprint sensor that controlled the fierce metal teeth in the road. From now on, I'd have to make things up as I went along. I had a small rucksack with me, filled with things I thought might help. Firstly, to check I knew what I was doing, I put my hand on the sensor. Entry denied, said a flat American voice. As expected. Then I pulled out Melissa's other jelly hand and slapped it on the sensor. Proceed. With a metallic grating noise, the teeth descended into the road and then rose again a moment later. Right, time to cut this village off properly. I pulled out some kitchen scissors. If I could find the right wire, I could be on my way in seconds. But all the inner workings of the sensor were completely encased in metal, and the post had been concreted into the ground. No chance of simply pushing it over, as I feared. My next idea was a genius touch, I thought. A few years back, before Shannon decided she was too cool for our family, she played an April Fool's trick on Dad, covering the bowl of the toilet with cling film. A fuzzy-eyed Dad had gone for an early morning wee and then shouted in horror as the wee bounced off in all directions, spraying the bathroom. With that in mind, I tore off a piece of film and carefully smoothed it over the surface of the fingerprint scanner, squishing out the air bubbles until it was nearly invisible. Holding my breath, I held Melissa's hand to the scanner. Proceed. My
Why
heart...
did you put the cling film on?
No. My heart sank at the same time as the metal teeth. I was nearly out of ideas, and the last one wasn't ideal. I'm not a natural vandal. Reggie would have found 14 ways to destroy the post by now, but I'd rather leave things as I find them. But when the government is threatening to ruin your life forever, I think a little rebellion is allowed. Pulling out a small bottle of Shannon's black nail varnish, she wasn't using that anymore, I painted patches all over the dark touchscreen, as I hoped it was hard to spot. Not that it really mattered. The sun had crept above the fells and it was getting warm now. People would be walking down from the village to pick up their cars for work soon. I didn't have time to wait until the polish dried. For the first but definitely not the last time, I crossed my fingers.
What did she do?
I think she's just put some polish on the sensor, so I think it might not be able to be used anymore.
Oh. But didn't she put cling film on?
Put cling film on as well. Maybe that was to secure the hand in place so that the teeth stayed down. I'm not sure. We'll have to see what happens with that. By the time I got back to the house and crept up the stairs, sweaty and exhausted, Reggie was already in Dad's bedroom, complaining about his poorly tummy. By the time I was ready for school, he was back in bed. Get some rest, said Melissa gently, tucking him in. I'm out this morning, but Shannon's on study leave, so I've told her to keep an eye out on you until Dad's back at lunchtime. Reggie's eyes were shut, screwed tight shut. But from where I was standing, hidden from Melissa's view, I could see a little thumb sticking up from under the blankets. I tried to play games in the playground before school, but I found it hard to concentrate, and Izzy wasn't there to talk to, or Charlie for that matter. I finally felt like a secret agent, but one who had been sent on a deadly mission into enemy territory, while everyone else was back at the base, comfy, warm and eating toast. At a quarter to ten, we filed into the main hall for the special assembly. Everyone around me chatted excitedly. A rumour was going around that 8S was about to scoop the tidy classroom cup. On stage, Mr. Frosty, strutting around in a peacock green suit with an orange bow tie, bouncing on his toes and crouching to grin wildly at the unfortunate little reception children who sat right in front of him. Staff filed in with their classes and joined the other grown-ups in the chairs that ran along the walls. Christy stood alongside the stage in place of Mr. Wharton, just as I expected. She was smiling nervously at nothing particular. Frosty saw excuse me. Frosty saw her and frowned. "Where's Jeff?" he mouthed. Christy mimed driving, crossing her arms and frowned, made a face like a tiger with bare white teeth, and then shook her head. It was like the worst game of charades I'd ever seen. You'd ever seen, yeah. Frosty looked at her like she was an idiot, which was fair enough. Then she pointed to her ear, the one we couldn't see, and gave a thumbs up, which didn't seem to reassure him at all. Mr. Frosty held up his arms and waited for quiet. "Good morning, Shiners." "Good morning, Mr. Frost." "Good morning, everyone," we droned. "And a big welcome to you all on this momentous day," said Frosty. "Sadly, Mr. Wharton can't join us this morning. He's been held up. Christy here tells me that he crashed into a lion on the way to work." The reception children tittered. "Still, I'm sure he'll come roaring in as soon as he can. Eh, children?" Frosty smiled at us and then looked witheringly at Christy, who was hopping from one foot to the other, a manic grin plastered across her face. "This is a very special assembly. As you know, very soon we'll be announcing the winners of the first ever Tidy Classroom Cup." A few children whooped and cheered. Frosty was into his stride now and appeared ever more animated than normal. He waved his arms and stalked around the stage, eyes darting everywhere. And it gets better. I'm very excited to tell you that at 10:30 a very special visitor will be congratulating the winning class live via our big screen. I breathed out with relief. It was just as I guessed. He bent his knees and raised his palms to the ceiling, and we all made a woo noise like he wanted us to. A very special visitor, very special indeed. We are so lucky. Children looked at each other in puzzlement. There was a reading, and we sang a couple of hymns, as usual. Frosty nearly drowned us out with his tuneless voice booming out over our own. He took to the stage again. Okay, children, this is it. The big one. The Tidy Classroom Cup. Are we ready? Yes, everyone shouted. Frosty looked over our heads at the adults. I said, are you ready? Frosty threw up his hands, a crazy grin on his face. Yes, everyone shouted, so loud that a couple of reception children started to cry. It was as if he was appearing in an episode of his own game show. Maybe he was. Frosty looked at Christy and then up at the clock, 10:20. Looks like we're all set, said Frosty, looking slightly nervous for the first time. Now then, there's only one person who can judge this new award, so let's get him up on stage. Please put your hands together and give a big rain and shine claparama to our one and only caretaking hero, Mr. Morton. We all clapped dutifully as the jailer lumbered on stage and stood glowering at us. For once he didn't have his keys, perhaps to avoid deafening us with the jingle jangle. Well, I don't need to tell you it's been a very close run. It's been a very close run thing, hasn't it, Mr. Morden? The jailer wrinkled his nose. We've seen some sterling efforts around school, but at the end of the day there was one clear winner. One class that really went the extra mile, pulled out the stops, went for broke and put their heart and soul into it. Frosty never said one word when he could vomit a whole dictionary. He was prolonging the agony, and he knew it. But what he didn't know was that we were about to discover if we'd been released from this crazy experiment or condemned to a miserable, fun-free life forever. The end.
No.
Frosty pulled an envelope out of his shiny green suit pocket. I must do this properly, he said, opening it. And so I'm thrilled to announce that the first winners of the Tidy Classroom Cup are... Frosty paused, grinning. Class 4. My heart hit the floor. It was over. Year 4. The plan was dead. Life would never be normal again. All the Year 4 kids were screaming, not sure which of their classes had won. Only kidding with you, he said. Though 4D did do a fantastic job, 4J not so much. The real winners were 2. He paused. I could hardly breathe. No, my mistake. Sorry. Year 2. It's class... no, my mistake. Sorry, Year 2. It's class 8S. There were gasps, cheers and applause. Mrs. Scott beamed with pride at the end of our row. Worthy winners, I'm sure we'll all agree, and I understand they clinched the award with a last-minute show of initiative. Is that right, Mrs. Scott? Mrs. Scott nodded, smiling. Perhaps you'd like to send up your most tidy-minded class member to receive the cup and greet our special visitor. I looked up at Mrs. Scott, smiling but feeling like I was going to be sick. Her eyes darted up and down the row of thrusting hands. She looked directly at me and nodded. I got unsteadily to my feet. Mrs. Scott patted me on the back as I passed, and Frosty helped me up onto the stage. Thora Batty, you and your class are the pride of Rain and Shine Academy, Frosty said, grasping my hand and pumping it up and down like he was trying to draw water from a deep well. But before we present you with a cup and you get to meet our special visitor, we have something for everyone to enjoy. Frosty looked over at the jailer and smiled, a smile which wasn't returned. For the last week, Mr. Morton has been kindly wearing a little camera hidden in his sweatshirt. You could call it a caretaker cam, couldn't you, Mr. Morton? Mr. Morton squinted and looked at Frosty as if he'd rather be cleaning the boys' toilets. And so, with the aid of our caretaker cam and help from the Academy's IT whizzes, we've made a special film all about our tidy school. A film all about the insides of the jailer's stinky cupboard, more like. I'm surprised they... Oh, a film about the inside... I'm not sorry, it's not him saying this. A film about the insides of the jailer's stinky cupboard, more like. I'm surprised they found a film of anything else on there. Frosty gestured to the sides. So I stood next to the jailer. I could smell him, a strange combination of stinky man and bleach. So, can we have the big screen switched on, please? And let's see what happened. Frosty put down the microphone on a small table and stood legs apart, facing the school, confident that he knew exactly what would be appearing on the screen behind him. But he was wrong.
Dad, no.
Yeah. We have to wait.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yeah, you have to wait till
No,
tomorrow.
Dad,